3 weeks from now, Donald Trump will no longer be president, and a lot of people will be breathing a huge sigh of relief. But one of the big worries for many of us is what happens when the next Trump comes along, someone who appeals to the base and is just as amoral and cynical as Trump, but who is smarter and savvier. Well, today we got something like an official candidate announcement for that role. It came from Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley, who casts himself as a reformist and a populist, a young senator willing to break with the old ideas and the old elites in charge of both parties. Hawley partnered with Bernie Sanders in calling for $2,000 COVID relief checks after Trump took that stance. And some of his positions, including his very justified attacks on the power of big tech, are shared by many on the left. But Hawley is also a calculating politician who many believe is positioning himself for a presidential run in the post-Trump era. And he has decided that the best way to do that is to show that he is willing to overturn a democratic election and American democracy itself in order to keep Republicans in power. Hawley announcing today that he will object to the certification of some states' electoral college results on January the 6th, when Congress is scheduled to ratify Joe Biden's very legitimate victory. It's a move opposed by Mitch McConnell because it means that every Republican senator will have to go on record and vote to either side with Trump and take a stand against American democracy, or instead defy the Trump base by acknowledging the legitimacy of the election result. That's because if a single senator, as well as a member of the House, objects to the Electoral College totals, lawmakers will have to vote on whether they agree to the objection. Now, there's virtually no chance for such an objection to succeed, since Democrats control the House and will not vote to overturn Biden's victory. But a number of Republican House members have said they will object anyway, and now Josh Hawley has as well. And to be honest, Hawley has done us a favor, because while many Republican senators still haven't publicly accepted the election results, none had gone this far. Hawley has now outed himself as the lead plotter in the Senate in Donald Trump's attempted coup. It's a scarlet letter that should follow him forever. He's gone on record against democracy, and he's forcing the rest of the GOP to go on record too. It's important to understand how unprecedented this is. As we noted earlier this week, not a single Democratic senator objected when Al Gore was declared the loser of the 2000 election, even though there was a much more credible case for the election having been stolen then. And when House Democrats objected, citing the incomplete vote count in Florida, it was Gore himself, who was presiding over the proceedings in Congress, who shut down the challenge.
Mr. Vice President, there are gross violations of the Voting Rights Act from Florida.
The
and I object, and it is not signed by a senator.
The chair thanks the gentlewoman from California on the basis previously stated. The point of order may not be received.
We should also note that after the 2004 election, there was one Democratic senator who did object, Senator Barbara Boxer of California. But it was a very different situation. John Kerry had conceded, and Boxer made clear she wasn't trying to overturn the election, but rather to spotlight problems in Ohio, such as voters being forced to stand in line at sub-precincts for 10 or even 12 hours. What Josh Hawley is doing is very different. Donald Trump continues to insist that the election was stolen from him. Last night, he was rage-tweeting deranged attacks on Republican officials in Georgia who won't steal the election for him, including a claim that the Secretary of State's brother, quote, works for China. Turns out the Georgia Secretary of State does have a brother, but he has nothing to do with Chinese tech companies or voting machines. He's just an ordinary guy. Then today, seemingly in response to Hawley's announcement, Trump tweeted, January the 6th, see you in D.C. On what basis is Josh Hawley contesting the election on the 6th of January? Georgia just finished yet another audit of its results that confirmed once again that Biden won and that there was no fraud. Trump's crack team has not been able to find evidence of fraud anywhere else. And their legal challenges have been laughed out of the courts again and again. At one point, they lost cases in 6 states in a single day. And look, it's one thing for some of the most infamous Republican backbenchers in the House, the usual suspects, to play along with Trump's coup attempt. Nobody expects much else from these people. But Josh Hawley is supposed to be a smart guy, the future of the GOP. I happen to think he knows what he's doing in trying to undermine a legitimate election. He just doesn't care. because he thinks it'll help him win over the Trump base. Hawley is a self-styled populist who loves to rail against the elites, despite being a member of the elite himself. The senator attended Stanford University and Yale Law after graduating from prep school. And is there anything less populist than telling more than 81 million Americans that their votes shouldn't count, so that he, Senator Joshua David Hawley, can scheme his way into the Oval Office come 2024?